Robin Hood Radio presents Stage Right or Not with Michele Willens. Michele is a longtime journalist and herself is a published playwright of several theatrical works. She's a frequent contributor to the Huffington Post, Daily Beast, and the Atlantic websites.
Another opening of another show.
Well, quite a week for me at the theater. In a glittery new production, I revisited The Man Who Got Us Mad as Hell till we couldn't take it anymore. I saw a small play starring two big TV names, a real-life brother and sister, no less. I enjoyed a unique holiday piece commemorating the 100 years since the war to end all wars. And finally, I viewed yet another rendition, a notably different one, of that Fiddler on the Roof. And yes, I ended up with a raspy throat, so bear with me. Well, let's start with that Fiddler. Now, no one knew what to expect of this production when it was at first announced. It was going to be not in a traditional theater, but at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in Battery Park, a cultural gem many may not even be aware of. It would be directed by 86-year-old Joel Grey, and it would be in Yiddish. Now, there are subtitles printed on cloth hangings on the sides of the lovely stage, which is minimally dressed with a few benches and chairs that are moved around by the large cast. Well, as you may have heard, the show is such a hit that it has been extended consistently, and next it will be making the move to an off-Broadway house. "Why do we stay up there if it is so dangerous?" are the words at the beginning of this iconic story. Well, it may be dangerous up there, but the elements that make this show magical are all here. The camaraderie of the village of Shtetl in 1905 Russia, as the Tsar was beginning to evict and eviscerate. The memorable songs, Sunset, Sunrise, Sunset, If I Were a Rich Man, Tradition, Matchmaker, Matchmaker. The cast is first-rate, though not a name is one you likely will have heard of. Well, except for Jackie Hoffman, who manages to be hilarious even in Yiddish as that gossipy matchmaker. By the way, I'm told that most of the performers do not speak Yiddish, but were taught their lines in a very specific way. So they were learning both the language and the word's expressive meanings at the same time. The only one I recognized was chutzpah. You can look at the subtitles or just sit back, listen to the music, watch the faces and interactions, and let the emotion wash over you. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say that Stephen Skybill is a terrific Tevye, the poor milkman and father of 5 daughters who reminds the man up there that he wouldn't mind being just a little less chosen. "Our old ways were once new, weren't they?" says Tevye. Well, some old shows manage to feel new, don't they? And now from the shtetl to the studio, the new studio, that is. Now, Network is based on the 1976 award-winning movie. You will hear a lot of different views on this one. For me and my guests, it was a disappointment. The director is the god of stage at the moment, Eva van Hove. I am not a huge fan of many of his staging decisions. With this one, the glitz of the screens and TV studio props, not to mention placing a portion of the audience on the side, as if in a restaurant, well, all this made it seem confusing as to exactly where and when we are. The news stories do come from the 70s, but somehow it all feels like 2018. The reason to see the show and the reason it is selling tickets like hotcakes is due to star Bryan Cranston as a fired anchorman. "I want another shot," he says, then turned reality show hero Howard Beale. Now, Cranston, of course, is excellent, but his role has been pretty much reduced to one preachy rant after another. Yes, he takes himself down to the audience at one time, but for me, those things just take us out of where we thought we were. My biggest problems with the show include the leading lady, the TV whiz played by Faye Dunaway in the movie. She won an Oscar for that role, so anyone would have a challenge competing. But Tatiana Maslany falls short in a stilted, unseductive performance. Subsequently, there's little chemistry between her and Tony Goldwyn as the conscience of the news division. He describes his own marriage as 33 years of shrill, shrieking fraud. Frankly, all the characters are given short shrift on stage, but my key criticism is that Network has been stripped of its satirical edge. If nothing else, Paddy Chayefsky's original script, much of which is intact here, I must say, was a biting take on television and its dangerous potential. Well, maybe because he was so right, it seems less urgent. Still, seeing Bryan Cranston as a defeated man turned a prophet, "I've been imbued," he roars. turned curmudgeon is always a treat, and I would suspect he'll be a front runner for his second Tony. And now we move downstairs, which is actually the name of the show currently at the Cherry Lane Theater in the West Village. Now, playwright Teresa Rebeck seems to write a play a week, and every other one sparkles. The others, like this one, well, not so much. She apparently whipped this up because Tyne Daly and her brother Tim were eager to act together in something. In this one, they are siblings who speak words that didn't ring true to me for 1 minute. Well, maybe the one about the brother feeling he was screwed, his word, out of their mother's will. Original, this is not. The plot, such as it is, centers on Tim, who is for some reason living in the basement of the home Tyne shares with her monster of a husband. I mean, this guy takes pleasure in killing animals and waving a wrench around as a weapon. It is certainly not a comedy, but the lines that got a few laughs include, "Are you a homo?" And, "Okay, that sentence has no verbs in it." Well, if those strike you as funny, okay. The performances are fine, and Tyne and Tim are brave to be up there doing such mediocre material, and I applaud any successful stars of television and film taking time out to return to or from where many of them came. And finally, I saw a moving, oddly soothing piece called All Is Calm, the Christmas Truce of 1914. This 75-minute production is at the lovely Sheen Center in the East Village. Directed and arranged by Peter Rothstein, this is simply a compilation of actual letters or poetry written during World War I and the carols that the enemy side sang on Christmas Eve during that one holiday season. Yes, both sides ceased fighting to do so. The Germans, apparently so moved by one song coming from the opposite line, even called for an encore. Troops forgot to fire while listening to that tenor voice, recalls one of the 10 storytellers. The piece is a gentle reminder of the mostly young men who went over there for the right reasons, but felt conflicted for so many others. "They'll call me a coward if I return home, but a hero if I fall," says one. I kept thinking that All Is Calm would make a perfect companion to one of the shows I reviewed last week, The Hello Girls, which is having a nice run at 5090s 59. That, too, is a true story, not known to all, about a particular group who found themselves at the front during World War I. In the case of All Is Calm, it is about a particular night. That battle is clearly having a creative moment, this being the 100th anniversary of its bloody conclusion. Just opened at the Armory this week is one called The Head and the Load, about the participation of Africans fighting in that war. Also a chapter forgotten or ignored. Other theater news, more closings, of course. Summer, the Jukebox Broadway show about Donna Summer, is closing, as was predicted. So too is Torch Song, formerly known as the Torch Song Trilogy. That revival was miscast and simply never took off this time around. Why so many of these shows have nice runs at small houses and then feel they should leap to the big ones, well, continues to surprise me. Lots of dollars invested and lost. Finally, I mentioned that Faye Dunaway, I mentioned her name before. Well, it's been announced she is planning to return to Broadway for the first time in decades in a one-woman piece about Katharine Hepburn. Well, I hate to sound like a Grinch, Jill, but if that ever happens, I'll buy you tickets to the show of your choice.
Ooh, I'll wait. I'll hold you to that. Now, speaking of Grinchery, let's get back to this for 1 second.
Yeah.
There are actually two things. One was a piece. There are two things. One, why do people feel that if they've got a really a successful and workable and entertaining show in a small house that they are selling, that it will automatically make the leap? I'm not. That's not something I've really ever. I mean, I've understood if you're selling out and if it's clearly big stage fare. And I'm thinking of the public as I say this because there have been transfers that make a lot of sense.
Yeah, they started it really with Chorus Line and Hamilton, but didn't do so well with a few others. And now they're thinking of moving the Bob Dylan piece over there. I think that's a mistake. I love the piece, but I think it works in a small audience, for a small audience in a small environment. And I don't, you have to think what people who are coming to town really want to see. And you guess right, sometimes the New York Theater Workshop had about 3 move over. I don't think any of them succeeded ultimately.
But what it ends up doing is, on a certain level, diminishing the quality of the piece itself, because
I agree.
some things are more intimate than others, and it seems in every bit in every part of life, the difference between when you're splashing out for 60 people or you've got 4 people for dinner.
Right.
It just you adjust.
Exactly. The interesting thing is some of the ones that have gone the other way, gone from big that really weren't that great big. I'm thinking of Sweet Charity, which I'm sure was a hit when it played on Broadway for a while, of course, but it wasn't really a great show. And yet they did it recently at the Signature in a totally pared down with Sutton Foster, tiny little production. And in a funny way, that one worked better. So that's happened with some of the Sondheim shows,
Right.
minimalizing them and going smaller. And sometimes that works.
Well,
But,
sometimes what happens is that you take, you strip away some of the, let's call them, for lack of a better term, it's stupid, but bells and whistles, and then you've got the essence of the show or the essence of the story that is the whole point of the exercise anyway.
That's
because
right.
you start with a good story, and love and life continue. Yeah, it's like it can't help but follow.
Yeah, everybody's dream to go to Broadway. Everybody's dream. And of course, Torch Song Trilogy was a huge Broadway smash when it first opened with Harvey Fierstein. Then they brought it back here to a small theater, which it did quite well. But right away they thought, okay, then let's go back to Broadway. Well, times have changed. They don't have the same leading man. There are a lot of considerations on these things, not to mention other people's money.
Stage Right or Not with Michele Willens, produced in the studios of Robin Hood Radio, robinhoodradio.com.